Sometimes a smell can take you back 50, 60 years in just a blink. Lord have mercy. Today it was the apple pie. Not just any pie, mind you, my mother's pie. Or at least, the woman I thought was my mother. That smell, warm cinnamon, a little nutmeg, butter in the crust that flakes just right. It came floating through the kitchen this afternoon, and I had to stop what I was doing. I just stood there, dish towel in my hand, tears right behind my eyes. Took me straight back to a Sunday afternoon in 1961. Summer, cicadas buzzing like little engines outside the screen door. Daddy whistling low out in the barn. Mama humming that old hymn, I'll Fly Away, while she pulled that pie from the oven like she'd done 100 times before. Back then, I didn't know that day would stick with me like glue all these years later. I didn't know there were secrets brewing under that roof, quiet as the dust on the windowsills. I didn't know my name, my real name, had been whispered by someone else before Mama ever held me. It's funny how life does that. One little thing, a smell, a melody, an old letter, and suddenly, you're not 76 sitting at your kitchen table. You're 16, barefoot on a linoleum floor, watching the sunlight hit the flour on your mama's hands. And all at once, you remember something. Or maybe, you start to wonder about all the things you don't remember. I'll tell you what, for most of my life, I thought I knew exactly who I was. Dorothy May, small-town girl from Broken Bow, Nebraska, schoolteacher, Sunday school soprano, mama to 2 strong girls and grandma to 5 of the wildest blessings you'll ever meet. Married my Tom at 22, wore the same apron for 40 years, and baked more pies than I can count. We didn't have a pot to pee in back in the day, but we made do. That's how we did it in those days. I figured my story was plain, but solid, set in stone. But 6 years ago, that stone cracked. And when it did, everything shifted. The ground under me didn't feel so steady anymore. And I've been carrying that feeling around ever since. I found something up in the attic. After my sister, half-sister, turns out, passed on. A box of her things. Letters. One of 'em changed everything. I'm not telling this story for drama. I'm telling it because, truth be told, I haven't been sleeping too well. Some nights, I sit out on the porch, listening to the crickets, staring at the dark. And I keep thinking, maybe it's time. Maybe somebody out there needs to hear this. Maybe somebody's carrying a truth too heavy for one heart. So, if you've made it this far, stay with me. 'Cause this ain't just a story about a letter, or a name, or even a lie. It's about identity, about roots, about what makes a life yours, even when pieces of it were hidden. And you young folks, you might think 70 is too late to have your whole world turned upside down. But I'm here to tell you, the truth don't give a hoot what year it is. There's a story I've kept to myself for many years, but lately I've been thinking maybe it's time I shared it. Tell me this. If everything you believed about who you are was a lie, would you even want to know? Back in my day, things moved slower. Not just the cars and the mail, but time itself. It was like the world took a deep breath and just stayed there for a while. I grew up in Broken Bow, Nebraska, little farming town with one blinking traffic light and churches outnumbering bars 3-1. The kind of place where everybody knew your name and your mama's name and what time she put the wash out on the line. Our house was small, white clapboard with green shutters, sitting quiet at the edge of a dirt road. Cornfields stretched out like oceans in every direction, golden and tall, whispering in the wind like they had secrets they were trying to keep. And I swear, when the breeze came in just right, it carried the smell of fresh soil and cut hay clear through the kitchen screen door. That smell, it still sits in my memory like a hymn. I was just a girl then, maybe 7, maybe 8, wearing hand-me-down dresses and scuffed saddle shoes, always running barefoot through the yard until Mama hollered at me to quit chasing the chickens. We didn't have much, but we made do with what we had. Mama was quiet, kind, but distant, like she was watching life through a frosted window. She spent most days in her chair by the window, crocheting or resting, humming under her breath. Sometimes I'd sit at her feet, pretending I was reading a book just to be near her. I remember how thin her hands were, and how she always smelled like rose lotion and linen. Daddy, well, he was a man of few words. Fought in the war, came back changed, though I didn't understand that at the time. He'd leave early in the morning, come home just before dark, boots dusty, face lined and tired. But when he smiled, land sakes alive, it lit up his whole face. We didn't have photographs from when I was a baby. I used to ask about it, Mama, how come there's no baby pictures of me? And she'd just smile and say, we couldn't afford a camera back then. Sweetheart, that was just the way things were. And I believed her. Of course I did. You don't question your parents when you're little. You just accept what's in front of you. And for a long time, what was in front of me was simple. Chores in the morning, school down the road, church on Sundays, supper at 6, and bed before the crickets got too loud. I thought life would always be that way, full of rhythm and routine and gentle repetition. As I got older, I started noticing things. Not big things, just little cracks in the paint. Mama never talked much about when she was pregnant with me. Other kids had stories how their mamas craved pickles, or how their daddies cried in the delivery room. I had none of that. When I asked, she'd just say, you were a quiet baby. Came right on time. Then she'd change the subject. Daddy would get up and leave the room. But I didn't push. I was a good girl. I minded my manners, got good grades, helped Mama with the dishes. I believed that kindness was the most important thing, that if you treated people well, they'd always come back to you. I used to dream of being a teacher. Not because I wanted to be somebody, but because I wanted to help little kids feel seen. I guess even then, deep down, I knew what it was like to feel a little invisible. Just a little. Not unloved, no, never that. But like maybe, just maybe, I was a guest in someone else's story. I didn't have the words for it back then, but I carried that feeling like a stone in my pocket. Funny how those early years shape you. You think you've left them behind, but really, they're stitched into your bones. And now, looking back, I see it clearer. The silence, the spaces between what was said and what wasn't, the stories that weren't told. I didn't know it yet, but my story, my real story, had already started. I just hadn't read the first page. It was a hot August day, the kind where the air sticks to your skin and the light comes in thick through the windows. We'd just buried my sister, well, half-sister, though I didn't know that at the time, and I was doing what we older folks tend to do after a funeral, sorting through things, trying to bring order to a life that had just ended. Her attic was full of dust and mothballs and forgotten things, the kind of place where the past sits quiet and heavy. I wasn't looking for anything special, just wanted to tidy up, maybe find a few keepsakes. But then I saw it. A box. It wasn't big, just a plain brown thing with a cracked lid and a strip of fabric tied around it like ribbon from some long-lost gift. There was something about it, the way it was tucked back behind an old trunk, almost hidden, that made my heart skip a beat. I can't explain it. I just knew. Like the way you know a storm's coming by the smell in the air. I sat down right there on the attic floor. The box creaked when I opened it. Inside were letters, stacks of them, yellowed with age, corners curled like dried leaves. Most were just old correspondence, bills, little notes about the garden or recipes. But one was different. It was thinner than the others. The envelope was fragile, torn along the edge. The name on the return address was someone I didn't know, Ruth Grayson. Now, I've read a lot of letters in my day, love notes from my Tom, sweet cards from my girls, even little scribbles from my grandbabies. But this one made my fingers tremble. I unfolded it slowly, like I was touching something sacred. And I read, "Please take care of Dot. I can't leave her in the home. I don't have a choice. She deserves love. She deserves more than I can give. I trust you. Please don't tell her yet. Let her grow up safe. I pray she'll understand someday." I stopped breathing. My name Dot, right there on the page, written in shaky cursive by someone I'd never heard of. My name. And suddenly, the attic wasn't just hot, it was heavy. Like the walls were closing in. Like time itself had folded in half. I sat with that letter in my lap for a long while. I don't know how long. Could have been minutes. Could have been hours. My mind was racing, but my body was still. I kept reading the name, Ruth Grayson, over and over. And then I looked at the date, 1947, the year I was born. Lord have mercy. I didn't know what to think. My first thought was that it was a mistake. A different Dot, maybe. Someone else's pain, not mine. But in my gut, deep down where truth lives, I knew. I just knew. I walked down those attic stairs like I was flaunting. The world looked different. The walls of my sister's house, the pictures on her shelves, they all had this new sharpness to them. Like I was seeing things in a different light. And in my chest, a strange feeling I couldn't name. Not fear, not sadness. Something else. Like a door had been opened, and I was standing at the threshold, heart pounding, not sure whether to step through. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table with the letter, reading it over and over, trying to hear the voice behind the words. Who was Ruth? Why did she give me up? Who knew? And why hadn't they told me? I didn't have answers yet. Just that one scrap of paper. But somehow everything had changed. And I remember sitting there, staring at my reflection in the dark kitchen window and thinking, if my life started with a secret, what else don't I know? You ever have a moment where the world looks the same, but you feel like you've been dropped into someone else's life? That was me, sitting at the kitchen table with a 70-year-old letter in my hands and a knot in my stomach I couldn't untangle. That night after the attic, I didn't say a word to nobody. I made coffee. I fed the cat. I swept the porch like I always did. But inside, it felt like my whole life had cracked down the middle. I tried to tell myself it was a mistake. That Ruth Grayson was maybe someone else's sorrow. But deep down I knew. And that knowledge sat heavy on my chest. I couldn't stop thinking what else was hidden. Who else knew? A few days later, I drove out to visit my Aunt Irene, my daddy's sister. She was 91 and sharp as ever. Sat on her porch with her quilt across her lap like she always did. I thought maybe she could clear it up. Maybe she'd laugh and say, "Oh honey, that's nothing. Just a mix-up." But when I mentioned the name Ruth Grayson, her face changed. Went pale. Real quiet. She stared at me for a long time, then said in a voice soft as dust, "I was told to keep my mouth shut." Back then, folks did what they had to do to protect a name, especially after the war. Your mama couldn't have children of her own. Ruth was just a poorhouse girl from the next county over. She wasn't but 16. They took you and they raised you, like you was theirs. And we weren't to speak of it again. I'll tell you what, that broke something in me. Not just the lie itself, but the calm way she said it. Like I was a hand-me-down coat passed from one life to another. Like love could be covered up by shame and made neat with silence. I drove home with my hands shaking on the wheel. My thoughts were louder than the radio. What did that make me? A secret? A mistake? Was my whole life built on a bargain no one asked me to make? I felt angry, betrayed, but also ashamed. ashamed that I hadn't known, ashamed for feeling angry at people who loved me. My mama, the one who raised me, she was sick most of her life. She never told me because maybe she thought I couldn't handle it. Or maybe she was afraid I'd love her less. And then came the real question, was I supposed to love her less? I didn't talk to my daughters right away. I didn't want them to see me unraveling. I'm their mama. I'm supposed to be the strong one, the steady one. But I wasn't steady. I was sinking in a sea of what ifs and why nots. And that's when the guilt crept in. I started thinking about how many times I'd brushed off the missing baby photos or the stories that never got told. How many Sunday mornings I'd sat beside a woman I called Mama, never once suspecting that she carried a different pain. I was angry, but I was also heartbroken for her, for Ruth, for myself. And worst of all was the fear. Not fear of the truth itself, but what the truth might take from me. What if my girls looked at me different? What if my grandbabies felt like I wasn't fully theirs? What if my whole identity, the woman I'd built over 7 decades, started to come apart piece by piece? I didn't know who to talk to. My Tom had passed years earlier. He'd have known what to say. He always did, but without him, I was just alone in this. No one taught me how to grieve a life you're still living. And so I kept moving through the days like nothing changed. But everything had. Every time I looked in the mirror, I saw a question staring back. Who are you really, Dot? And what do you do when your roots aren't where you thought they were? I remember the moment like it was yesterday. You know how people say that like it's just a phrase. But I mean it. I remember. I can still smell the rain on the porch. I can still feel the tremble in my hands. I can still see the second hand on the wall clock and how it just seemed to stop. Just like that. Time froze. And so did I. It was early spring. One of those raw, gray afternoons where the sky don't know whether to cry or clear up. I'd just gotten off the phone with a lady from Ancestry DNA. Kind voice, young, polite. She said she was following up on my test results. Said they'd found a potential match for a close biological relative. A niece, she said. Her name's Marion. Lives in Iowa. I remember whispering, I don't have a niece in Iowa. But I did. She was Ruth's niece. Ruth, my birth mother. Turns out, Ruth died back in 1975. Never married. No other children. Just one photo left in a church record book. Faded, black and white. A girl with dark curls and tired eyes, staring just left of the camera, like she knew the world was already turning without her. And that's when it hit me. Hard. There was no one left to ask. No one left to answer the questions. No voice, no arms, no explanation. No letter from Ruth waiting somewhere to explain it all. Just silence. Heavy as wet wool. I walked to the bathroom. Not sure why. I think I just needed to see myself. Needed to look in the mirror and make sense of the face I'd been wearing for 70 years. And I stood there, staring. I don't know how long I looked at myself. My eyes, my cheekbones, the slight tilt of my chin, things I'd always chalked up to Daddy's side or Mama's mother. But now, none of that was true. None of it. I belonged to someone else. A girl named Ruth who had worked in someone's kitchen, prayed alone at night, and gave up her baby without ever knowing how that baby would turn out. And in that moment, something in me broke clean down the middle. I didn't cry, not at first. I just felt empty, like all the stories I'd been told had slipped through my fingers like dry cornmeal. My roots, my name, my beginnings all swept away in one quiet moment. I remember whispering out loud to my reflection, "Who am I now?" And Lord help me, the silence that followed was louder than anything I'd ever heard. I lost something that day. Not a person, not an object, but a sense of myself. I'd spent my whole life building a story, A version of me that was stitched together from Sunday dresses, classroom chalk, apron strings, lullabies. But underneath it all, there was another story, one I'd never been given the chance to read. And here's what's cruel. There was no villain, no evil woman who stole me, no secret affair. Just two women, Ruth, who gave me away out of fear and love, and Mama, who raised me with silence and kindness. But even love, when it hides the truth, can leave a wound. I stood there until the sky outside turned black, until the mirror looked like a window, and I didn't recognize the woman in it. And I remember thinking, this is it. This is the part in the story where everything turns, where the girl you thought you were dies, and the woman you truly are starts to be born. But Lord have mercy, birth don't come without pain. After the truth came out, life didn't stop, it just didn't. It was like someone turned the volume down on everything. The birds still sang in the morning. The kettle still whistled at 7:05. The mail still came. Bills still needed paying. But I wasn't the same. And it's a strange thing, living in a world that looks just like yesterday's, but feels colder, quieter, thinner somehow. For a while, I moved through my days like a ghost. I'd find myself staring out the window for minutes at a time, forgetting what I'd come in the room for. I stopped putting on my lipstick in the mornings, stopped singing while I made breakfast. I even let the garden go a bit, weeds popping up in places I never would have allowed before. It wasn't depression, not exactly. It was more like hollow, just empty. Like the part of me that always knew who she was had gone off somewhere, leaving me behind to figure it out on my own. I didn't cry much. I didn't rage. I just existed. And I'll tell you what, the silence was the hardest part. Not the kind around me, the kind inside. The questions that had always been settled were now wide open, and I didn't know what to do with them. Who was I if my past wasn't mine? If my name wasn't given by the woman who birthed me, and my stories were stitched together by people who'd never told me the whole truth? There were days I'd sit in my chair and look through old photo albums, not to remember, but to study. Like maybe, just maybe, if I looked long enough, I'd find some hint of the girl I used to be. But she wasn't there, not like she was. She'd changed. Even my own reflection felt unfamiliar. My face, a face I'd seen in the mirror every morning for 76 years, suddenly felt like it belonged to someone else. Someone borrowed. Someone between two names. And I started doubting things I never thought I'd question. I used to believe that love was enough. That if someone raised you, tucked you in, held your hand when you were sick, that counted more than blood. But now I wasn't sure. Did Ruth think about me on my birthdays? Did she ache when she gave me up? Did she watch from afar? Or did she bury it so deep she forgot? And Mama, my Mama, did she ever want to tell me? Or was she afraid the truth would undo what we had? Was I part of her redemption or her regret? I didn't have answers. Just silence. Church felt different, too. I used to walk through those double doors with peace in my heart, humming old hymns and shaking hands with folks I'd known since I was a girl. But now it felt like everyone was speaking a language I couldn't understand. I still believed in God, but it was a quieter faith now. Less certain, less tidy. And so I pulled back. From friends, from the ladies' circle, even from my girls for a little while. Not because I didn't love them, but because I didn't know how to show them the version of me that was still rearranging inside. You spend a lifetime building a house inside yourself. And when the foundation cracks, even if the walls are still standing, you feel like a stranger in your own home. That's what those months were like. I didn't fall apart in a dramatic way. I didn't scream or run away. I just sat in the quiet, lived in it, let it echo through me. Sometimes you have to let everything fall silent before you can hear what your heart's really saying. And somewhere in that silence, a new kind of voice began to whisper. It started with a knock on the door. Simple as that. 3 soft raps, just after lunch on a Wednesday. I wasn't expecting anyone, hadn't had visitors in weeks, truth be told. I shuffled to the door with my slippers on, apron still dusted with flour from the biscuits I didn't have the heart to finish. And there they were, my girls. Both of 'em. Susan with her hair pulled back like she always did when she meant business, and Linda with that soft, worried look she inherited from her daddy. They didn't say much at first. Just hugged me. Long, real hugs. The kind that tell you they know, even if you haven't said the words out loud. "We know about the letter," Susan finally said. My heart dropped. I hadn't told them. I'd meant to. I'd practiced it in my head 100 times. "Girls, there's something I found," but the words always caught in my throat. I started to speak, but Linda took my hand. "You don't have to explain anything, Mama. You're ours. Always have been." That was the first time I cried. Not from pain, but from the sudden, overwhelming relief of being seen. Fully, without question. They sat with me for hours that day. I pulled out the letter, showed them Ruth's name, the box, the test results, told them how lost I'd felt, how strange the world had become. I was afraid they'd see me different, that maybe I wasn't theirs the way I'd always believed. But Susan just laughed, real soft. "Mama," she said, "you raised us. You taught me how to make pie crust and spell Mississippi and get grass stains out of church clothes. That blood doesn't change a thing." And then Linda reached into her purse, said the grandkids had made me something. It was a frame, wooden, hand-painted with little hearts and cornflowers. Inside, stitched in blue thread on cream linen, were the words, "Your roots are love, not blood." I held that frame in my lap like it was glass. And maybe, in a way, it was. Fragile, beautiful, reflecting back a truth I hadn't been able to hold on my own. That moment didn't fix everything, but it shifted something. Later that week, I found myself humming while I watered the roses. Just a little, a note or two. Then I baked that apple pie again, the way my mama, used to do. This time, I didn't cry. I just let the smell fill the house and wrap around me like a shawl. And then one morning, I got up and wrote a letter. Not to Ruth, not to my daughters, but to myself. Just a few lines. I wrote, "Dear Dot, you are real, you are whole, and you're still you." That letter sits in my Bible now, right there in Psalms. I read it sometimes when the ache comes back. 'Cause it does come back every now and then, usually late at night, or when the wind gets that certain chill. But I'm not floating anymore. My feet are back on the ground. And while the ground may look different, it's still mine to stand on. So I started doing small things again. Volunteered at the library. Made cookies for the widows group. Sent birthday cards to the neighbor kids. Nothing big. Just life. Quiet life. And I realized, maybe the story ain't about how you start. Maybe it's about what you grow, even if the roots were planted by someone else. It took me a long time to go back. Longer than I'd care to admit. I always told myself there was no point, that the past was buried, and the road to it too overgrown to bother traveling. But deep down, I think I was scared. Scared of what I'd feel. Or worse, what I wouldn't feel. But one October morning, just as the leaves had turned that rusty gold that only Nebraska knows how to do, I got in my car and drove. The map said it was only 40 miles, but the weight in my chest made it feel longer. I took the old state road, the one lined with telephone poles and faded barns, and the further I went, the more the years seemed to peel away, like I was driving straight back into a part of myself I'd never truly met. The house Ruth worked in was long gone, torn down sometime in the 70s, the county clerk said. But the land was still there, wide open, sun-soaked, scattered with memory I couldn't quite name. There was a young family living there now. I knocked on the door, explained who I was, or rather, why I was there, and the woman just smiled and said, "Take all the time you need." So I walked out to the edge of the cornfield, just me and the wind, and I sat down in the grass. I looked out over those rows, neat and golden, stretching toward the horizon like pages of an unwritten book. And I let it come, the grief, the gratitude, the ache, the awe. All of it. The questions I'd never get answered. The face I'd never see. The voice I'd never hear. I let it all come, like rain after a long, dry season. And then I did something I hadn't planned. I pulled the letter, the one Ruth wrote in 1947, from my coat pocket. I'd kept it all this time, folded soft from 1,000 rereadings. And for a moment, I held it to my heart. Then I laid it down, right there in the dirt. I didn't bury it. I didn't burn it. I just left it. Let the wind take it if it wanted to. Let the land hold it the way it once held me. Because I realized I didn't need it anymore. I didn't need proof. I didn't need answers. I didn't even need to understand it all. I just needed to say, out loud and to no one, "I forgive you. And I thank you." And I did. I forgave Ruth for leaving me, for not telling me, for dying before I ever got to look her in the eye. I forgave Mama for raising me in silence, for doing what she thought was best even if it broke her. And most of all, I forgave myself for waiting so long to face it, for carrying shame that wasn't mine, for thinking that not knowing where I came from somehow made me less whole. I chose in that field not to be a secret anymore, not to be a question mark, not to be someone else's quiet sacrifice. I chose to live without resentment, without apology, just alive. When I got home, I took the frame the grandkids made, the one that says, "Your roots are love, not blood," and I moved it, took it off the mantle, put it by my front door. So every time I walk out into the world, I remember who I am. Dorothy May, daughter, mother, teacher, friend, a woman who is given away, and who, somehow, found her way back to herself. You know, when you get to be my age, folks start to scan you about life lessons like you've been sitting around gathering 'em in jars, labeling each one with a neat little bow. But that's not how it works. Truth don't come in lessons. It comes in moments. And most of the time, you don't even realize they were teaching you something till years later, when you're standing at the sink washing dishes or hearing a song you ain't thought of in decades. And what this whole thing, this truth about my past, about Ruth, about myself, what it really gave me wasn't answers. It gave me clarity. I used to think roots were everything. That where you came from defined who you were, like a recipe you couldn't change. But I don't believe that anymore. Now, I think it's not where you come from that matters. It's what you do with what you were given. And some of us weren't given much. Some of us had to build our lives with borrowed tools and pieces that didn't seem to fit. But you know what? We still built them. And that counts for something. That means something. I think about Ruth sometimes. About the courage it must have taken to hand me over and walk away. That's a kind of love I didn't understand when I was young. Back then, I thought love had to stay. Had to hold your hand and sing you lullabies. But now, I know that sometimes love lets go not because it wants to, but because it has to. And I think about Mama, too. How hard it must have been to raise a child born from someone else's body. To choose every day to love me like her own and carry that secret till the end. She never told me, but she showed me, in the way she tucked me in how she waited up for me after school dances, in every burnt pie crust and crooked Easter dress. I see it now, all of it, and I've stopped to skin why. I used to want to untangle every knot, to understand every missing piece. But I've learned that peace doesn't come from answers. It comes from acceptance. So, if you're listening to this, if you're carrying some old ache, some unanswered question, some name you never knew how to say out loud, let me tell you something. You don't have to wait for closure to start living. You don't have to have it all figured out to move forward. Maybe, just maybe, it's time to stop waiting on a letter that may never come. To stop wishing the past looked different. To stop thinking your story ain't worth telling because it started messy. Your story matters, not in spite of the cracks, but because of them. And if no one's told you lately, you are not broken. You are not lost. You are not too late. The truth is, sometimes the most beautiful things grow from places we never meant to be. So plant something, call someone, write your own name on your own page, and keep going. Because I'll tell you what, life's not about knowing everything. It's about loving people anyway. And maybe, just maybe, it's time you stopped waiting and started living. Well, if you've stayed with me this far, bless your heart. I reckon we've shared a few things, you and I. Some quiet, some sorrow, maybe a tear or two between us. And maybe now you see me a little clearer than most folks do. Not just as Grandma, the pie lady with the soft voice and the porch full of geraniums, but as a woman who's lived through a truth she never expected, and kept going anyway. Now, I want you to know something. This story I've told, it ain't just about the past. It's not just about old letters and dusty boxes and names whispered behind closed doors. It's about now. It's about who we choose to be when the stories we were given don't quite line up with the truth we find. It's about you too. Maybe you've got something in your heart you've never told anyone. A name, a regret, a secret. Maybe you've been waiting for the right moment to speak it, or to forgive it, or to let it go. Well, I'll tell you what. Life don't wait for perfect timing. It just keeps moving forward, whether you're ready or not. And sometimes, if you listen real close, you'll hear it whisper, it's okay to begin again. Even now, even at 70, even at any age, I'm not angry anymore, not confused, not broken, not searching the sky for answers that won't come. These days, I sit on my porch in the early evening with a warm cup of tea and a blanket across my lap. I listen to the breeze rattle the wind chimes. I watch the shadows grow long across the fields. And I think about all the people I've loved, the ones who raised me, the ones who left, the ones who stayed. And I know now, love is real, even when it's quiet, even when it hides behind fear, even when it shows up too late to say so out loud. You know, sometimes I wonder if Ruth were here, what would she say? Would she recognize me? Would she smile and say, you turned out just fine? And sometimes when the house is still, I close my eyes and I swear I can feel her there. Just for a moment. The soft brush of a mother's love, a love that never really left, even if it had to stay hidden. So I'll ask you something, now that we're sitting here together at the end of all this. What truth are you still afraid to face? Is it time to open the letter? To make the call? To tell someone the thing you thought you'd carry forever? 'Cause maybe, just maybe, your story's been waiting for you to turn the page. And if you don't know where to start, just start where I did. With honesty, with love, and with the quiet courage to say, this is who I am now. So, that's my story. Or at least, the part I finally had the nerve to share. And if you see me someday sitting out on my porch in Broken Bow with my tea and my old sweater, wave. Or better yet, stop and say hello. I've always got time for a good story. Now I'll leave you with this. Do you believe that love, the real kind, ever truly disappears? Or does it just wait for the right moment to come home? Sometimes, when the wind shifts just right through the corn, I get the feeling. Maybe it remembers.